Watkins has scored a combined 80 points in USC's last 2 games. Watkins is now the nation's number 2 scorer with 27.2 points per game. Iowa's Caitlin Clark leads the nation at 32.4. The Kansas City Chiefs and San Francisco 49ers arrived in Las Vegas Sunday. Super Bowl 58 is next Sunday at 3 p.m. on CBS. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
Climate is king.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we believe that caring for the community means caring about the climate. You might have heard that we announced a pretty bold 12-month, $2 million campaign to do 4 things. Increase climate literacy, turn up the volume on communities of color in the climate conversation, connect everyday people with the resources they need to survive and thrive, and highlight frontline climate justice crusaders of color throughout this year. KBLA Talk 1580 will be bringing you insightful interviews on all of our shows to help raise your climate IQ. Each quarter this year, we will also be hosting free climate events in various communities throughout the city with food, fun, and forward-thinking conversations. Thanks to partners like LADWP, Metro, Caltrans, the Sierra Club, the California Community Foundation, the California Endowment, AQMD, MWD, and more. You'll also be hearing more about a couple of national town halls broadcasting live from Los Angeles, to which you will be invited. And we'll be rolling out a robust social media campaign on all our platforms, as well as an outdoor media campaign, all designed to educate, enlighten, and empower you in our fight for climate justice.
We want cleaner air.
Caring about the community means caring about the climate. At KBLA Talk 1580, we believe that we really can change the world if we care enough. 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 If we care enough.
1, 2, 3, go! Ha ha! I'm gonna try to keep it coming. Things ain't always smooth, but I'll be alright as long as I can find the good. Yes, I will. Somehow I know that I can make it. You seem to like my style. Don't you worry, I'm gonna be around a while. Yes, I will. I'm just happy to see you talk to me back in style again.
Live from historic Leimert Park in Los Angeles, California, I'm Tavis Smiley, and I'm so glad to see you and me back in stride again. Before we get started with today's show, let me invite you to follow me on Facebook and Instagram at The Real Tavis Smiley and get updates on X, that's formerly Twitter, at Tavis Smiley. By the way, should you miss any part of today's program or want to catch up on previous shows, you can always visit thetavisSmileyShow.com. That's thetavisSmileyShow.com or wherever you get your podcast, and listen to the Tavis Smiley podcast version of this program at your leisure. Another great show on tap for you today. In our second hour, a conversation just in time for Black History Month with the oldest living survivor of the Tulsa Massacre, the 109-year-old, that's right, 109-year-old Viola Ford Fletcher. Her book is out, which makes her also the oldest author in the history of publishing at 109. The book is called Don't Let Them Bury My Story, the oldest living survivor of the Tulsa Race Massacre. In her own words, we'll be joined again for an amazing dialogue with 109-year-old Viola Ford Fletcher, the oldest living survivor of the Tulsa Race Massacre. She and her grandson, Ike Howard, will join us in hour 2 today. I look forward, as I'm sure you do, to that inspiring conversation. In our third hour, 2 conversations. Up first, the mother of Amadou Diallo, Kadiatou Diallo. Sadly, we talk routinely these days about police killings of unarmed black men and women for that matter, but do you remember the killing of the 23-year-old student Amadou Diallo years before, well before Black Lives Matter? Fired upon with 41 rounds and shot 19 times by 4 NYPD plainclothes officers who later claimed to have mistaken him for a rape suspect from a year earlier. Insane. The cops were charged with second-degree murder and later acquitted, which prompted outrage all across America a quarter century ago, and issues of police brutality, racial profiling, and contagious shooting were placed finally front and center. Well, believe it or not, as I said, yesterday marked 25 years since the death of Amadou Diallo. I am pleased to have Amadou's mother, Kadiatou Diallo, join us at the top today of Hour 3. On the B side of Hour 3, a conversation with Jamal Mayfield about his debut book, Smoke Kings. The buzz on this book has reached a fever pitch, with Jamal Mayfield being heralded as a fresh and fierce new voice to crime fiction. In the book, which is powerful and propulsive, it's a novel with a diverse and unforgettable cast of characters. Jamal basically wrestles with this question: what would happen if reparations for African Americans were finally charged and exacted, wait for it, charged and exacted by force? We'll talk about Smoke Kings, this hot new novel from Jamal Mayfield, on the backside of Hour 3. But I am delighted to commence this program today in this first hour with America's most preeminent black pollster, Cornell Belcher. Cornell Belcher, how are you today, sir?
I'm well, sir. I'm honored to be on with you. Thank you so much.
I am honored to have you on. As I said, and I mean that sincerely, you are and have been for quite some time now the most preeminent pollster, certainly in Black America, or covering Black America for the rest of this country. And let me just start by saying thank you. It's fascinating because today, ironically, my home station, we are syndicated and heard across the country, of course, but my home station where I sit right now here in L.A., where we're being swept away by rains, as everybody knows. I was literally walking around the building this morning looking at all the spots where I see rain trying to get in this building. So it's messing us up. It's causing a lot of havoc here in Southern California. But we're flagship here in L.A., and my home station today just released a poll about attitudes in the political season here in Southern California, namely the DA's race, a very competitive race. As you know, DAs across the country in the last few years, progressive DAs have been elected in all kinds of cities. They first got elected, then there was a huge pushback, and some of them got recalled, like Chesa Boudin up in San Francisco. So it's a fascinating race here in L.A., and we did our own poll about the DA's race, about crime, and a few other issues. And so that poll is released today. So if you're listening in Los Angeles, go to our website at KBLA 1580, all the data. We want to share it with you. It's not just the media who's got a hold of it, but you can read it for yourself at KBLA 1580. All the details about our poll here locally that you'll want to check out. And there's some storylines there, Cornell. Some trends, I think, for the national audience as well. So you go to KBLA 1580 and see specifically how black folk in this part of the world feel about crime, about progressive DAs and the like. It's at KBLA 1580. All that said, watching my clock here, I want to ask Cornell a question to get started, but I'm going to cut him off in 20 seconds. That's not fair to him. Let me do this. When we come forward, we'll commence our conversation with America's preeminent black pollster, Cornell Belcher, on Tavis Smiley.
You're listening to Tavis Smiley. Tavis Smiley. Ranked number 45 on the Heavy 100 list of the 100 most important radio talk show hosts in America.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
Listen up, City of Los Angeles renters that live in rent-controlled units. Landlords can now increase your rent by 4%. Know these 3 facts. The rent increase is allowed February 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2024. An extra 1% per utility up to 6% can be added if the landlord pays the entire gas and electric bill. And illegal rent increase complaints can be filed at housing.lacity.org. Check if you live in a rent-controlled unit and learn more at housing.lacity.org. Be informed, be protected, be at home.
Taco Bell just dropped the new Cravings Value Menu. Now you can get 10 items for $3 or less, which means you can get the food you want for the price you want. It's almost like you can have your cake and eat it too. But in this case, it's a double-stacked taco from the new Cravings Value Menu. So basically, you can have your double-stacked taco and eat it too, which is a lot crunchier than cake. The new Cravings Value Menu is here. Get it at Taco Bell today. At participating U.S. Taco Bell locations while supplies last. Contact store for price and participation which vary. Tax extra.
She's so smooth. I'm interrupting my own shower to remind you to treat your skin like the queen she is with Olay Hyaluronic Body Wash. Packed with Olay's highest level of vitamin B3 complex. It's so moisturizing that it will give you visibly smoother, head-turning skin in just 14 days. People wondering, how'd she get so smooth? Olay Hyaluronic Body Wash. Also, try Olay Hyaluronic Body Lotion.
You're all set with your Medicare prescriptions, Mrs. Brown.
This is not just low-cost copays at Walgreens.
I can actually help you set up 90-day refills if you want.
This is having a partner you can trust. Get low-cost copays, 90-day refills, and delivery from your neighborhood Walgreens. This is being independent. Together. Walgreens.
Restrictions apply. For details, see walgreens.com/pharmacy.
Let's get back to more of this rich dialogue with Tavis Smiley.
Just getting started with Cornell Belcher, the best pollster in this country covering Black America. Let me start with the obvious question, at least for me, Cornell Belcher. In light of, my information that I shared a moment ago about the poll that we've done here locally, why is it that Black opinions, it's a two-part question, which I don't typically do, but let me put both of it out there and both pieces out there rather than let you take it for what it's worth. But why is it that Black opinion matters when it comes to polling? And why is it that so many polls don't, in fact, consider the Black community, given how significant a voting bloc we are?
Well, thank you for those questions, Tavis. And I will try to dissect those. One is, I think polls are important for capturing the opinions and attitudes of voters or the general electorate, whatever universe you're really trying to narrow down in. If you're doing a poll in California or LA, taking a temperature of how the marketplace feels, I think is important, but I also think it's important for democracy. I tell people all the time is part of what we're doing is aiding the democratic process.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the end, the policymakers are supposed to understand where the people are, and what we're really doing is giving the people a platform for telling the policymakers how they feel. And oftentimes, we'll come to electeds and say, this is the way your constituency feels about X, Y, or Z, just so that you know.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully the policymakers will move or act in a way that's according to the wishes of their constituency. On why it's important for African Americans to be considered in polls, look, part of the issue that I think is problematic broadly with polling is, Tavis, say you get a poll back of 1,000 voters nationally.
Mm-hmm.
And what you have in that sample is you probably have roughly 90 or less African Americans in that overall in that overall sample.
Mm-hmm.
So it's such a small slice of the overall sample that you really can't do a lot of in-depth analysis. And I think what has become problematic is you have organizations that are driving stories and narratives around such a small sample size of a constituency, be African Americans or Hispanics or Latino voters, and I think that becomes really problematic, right? So one of the things that we do in polling to solve for that is you either have an oversample, and I'm getting in the weeds here, but you got a smart audience.
I do.
So in polling, we like to do oversample so that we have, a 200 or 300 oversample of African Americans or Hispanic Latino voters or AAPI voters, which are really important in a big constituency out there in California, so that we can then do subgroup analysis within the poll. Where you run into problems is when you take 90 or 80 minorities, and then you extrapolate from that really big, broad thematics from that, which can be misleading and misguided. So what we try to do is we actually try to do large samples of just either African Americans or Latino, Hispanic voters, just of those communities, so that we have big, robust samples of those voters, and we can do in-depth analysis of. And what I mean by that is segmentation, right?
Yeah.
How are college-educated Black women feeling versus non-college, right? How are seniors, Black seniors, feeling around the issue versus millennials? That kind of analysis that you can do with larger sample size.
I want to ask you about Black people and their lack of trust in these polls in just a second. I should mention that the primary reason I wanted to have Cornell Belcher on today, I wanted him on last week when this piece came out. His schedule and our schedule just didn't jive until today. I'm always honored to have him on. He's a busy guy. But he wrote a piece last week for the LA Times. It got my attention rather immediately when I saw it. And the piece essentially said, here's why you should not panic about all these polls indicating the trouble that Joe Biden is in the upcoming race against Donald Trump. Here's why you should not panic about these polls that you keep reading that Trump is going to eat Joe Biden's lunch in November. And so I want him to unpack why we should not panic about all these polls that seem to have a pattern to them. They show that Joe Biden's in trouble in a lot of ways with young voters on the Israel-Hamas issue, on and on and on. He's a president, so he's not perfect, and everybody doesn't like you, obviously. But why is it that Cornell Belcher believes that we should not panic, given all the polls that seem to be showing, again, a trend line about Biden v. Trump? We'll get to that in just a second. But since we're talking about polling and our poll out today about the political races here in Southern California and the work you do nationally covering the Black community, if I've heard it once, I've heard it more times than I can count. As a matter of fact, I'd be independently wealthy if I got paid for every time I've heard this comment, and I know you've heard it more than I have, given that you are Cornell Belcher. And that is, you talk to Black folk, and Negroes will tell you, ain't nobody ever called me and asked me no poll question. I ain't never been polled. Anybody reached out to me. So there is this distrust, I think, in many parts of our community about polling, because as you said a moment ago, they know that people aren't checking for us. When they do include us in these polls, the sample size is too small. So you end up making all these assumptions about the Black community and how they think and how they feel, or you just ignore them altogether. But there is this undercurrent I've always felt in Black America for the years I've been covering these issues, that many Black folk just don't trust polls because they ain't never been called by no pollster. I yield to you, Cornell Belcher.
Well, there is a conversation about math that I'm going to try to not get too deep into, because I know you got smart listeners, but their eyes are glazed over, right? That's based around the theory of randomness is why all this works. But let me give you this analogy is that when you go to a doctor's office, the doctor doesn't have to take all the blood out of you in order to understand what's going on inside your body. They can do that from just a sample of your blood. Mm-hmm. And that's the same thing we do with polling. It's based on the theory of randomness, is that I don't have to talk to everyone in a given universe, as long as I talk to a representative sample of that universe, the same way that a doctor operates in the lab. Mm-hmm. So the vast majority of people in this country, you won't be polled. But as long as we get a representative sample of those in that universe, especially when you're talking about say likely voters, if we're pulling samples from a voter file for say a congressional district, say out in California, we know who tends to vote in those elections because we have the history. And so if we can pull a representative sample of people in that congressional district, again, we don't have to poll everyone in that congressional district as long as we're pulling a representative sample from that polling district. The issue with minority constituencies is the more narrow the demographic group, the harder it is to sample and poll them, and it becomes more and more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And as is true in all marketplaces, people will look for a cheap way out. And so what you often have in far too many polls, especially polls that are done for publication, that is often done by news organizations, who are trying not to spend a great deal of money on polling, is you do have smaller samples tend to get smaller samples of minorities, and you don't tend to do as much calling and callbacks in minority communities because it drives up costs, and you end up weighting these smaller samples up so that they're proportionally in line with what their percentage is. For example, if 12% of a congressional district is Hispanic or Latino, what you'll get typically is too often is they will upweight their smaller sample of Hispanic or Latino voters so that they represent that 12%, right? So there are some issues overall with polling, and when you talk about narrow subsets and people not wanting to spend the resources to really accurately capture a representative sample of minority voters. There's also something happening now that I think a lot of my friends, my academic friends, sets their hair on fire is, you have these online panels,
Mm-hmm.
which is a lot cheaper and a lot quicker, but far too often your online panel comes into a question of representation. And look, if you're building an online panel of several thousand, I think a lot of my friends in the academic circles argue, one, is this a representative sample? Is this in fact a random sample? And if you can't pull a random sample online, which very few people can do, you're actually not doing polling, right? And so you have a panel, but how representative is that panel of your likely voting universe? And particularly when you're talking about voters of color,
Mm-hmm.
and downscale voters who we know are underrepresented online in many ways, in particular sort of rural communities where you especially if you're a rural community and rural person of color, where we know it's more complicated to do for you to be represented properly online.
Yep. So your advice or your comment to those black persons listening who again don't trust polls is what?
Well, quite frankly, it goes to the broader question, Tavis, and I'm going to be I'm not going to be popular, which is fine. But it goes to the broader question that I was making in my Los Angeles Times piece, and that is you shouldn't care. And quite frankly, most of the public should never see a poll.
You're just so I'm clear, what you're saying is that we should not care. It's NOT, correct?
You should not care because
Okay.
because most of you should not see polling data. Polling data is something that should be primarily kept for internal strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem with polling now is that everyone seems to be doing polling, and what you have now is people are driving narratives, whatever narrative they want.
Right.
via polling, right? And no bigger example of this is the red wave of the last midterm election, where there was a couple of polls out, and then it got into this Republican or right-wing Fox echo chamber, and it became a huge thing where they were driving every night a narrative about a big red wave midterm election that was going to sweep Democrats out of office all over the country, and historical wins for Republicans. And none of that was actually in the data, right? It was in a couple of polls that got echoed because people are using polls now to drive their own political narrative. And
it never happened, as we all know.
Right, it never happened because it was never there actually it was never there actually in the data, right?
Right.
And this is why I say, I'm a pollster, but there's far too much talk and conversation about polls in the media, and every time a reporter or I'm on television talking about where a candidate is in a poll. The question is the consumer better served by a horse race number? And the horse race number is sort of the candidate head-to-head.
Sure.
Which by the way, we know it's going to move. And Tavis, we're literally going to spend, in case of a presidential race, they're going to spend $100 million to move that number, right? So where it is now is not going to be where it is in 2 or 3 months from now.
Yeah.
So are we better served having a conversation about that horse race number and whether or not a candidate is doing well or a candidate is doing bad, or we better served from the media standpoint of every time we cover a horse race number, how about cover what is the policy impact of Trump's foreign trade versus Biden?
Yeah.
What is the policy impact of Trump's wanting to pull back from NATO versus keeping NATO strong, right? It is something that the voter can use to help make a decision. And again, I'm not being partisan here at all. This is not a partisan conversation,
Sure.
right? This is, are we giving the voters, the consumers, the information that they need to make informed decisions? And what I would argue, and I argued in my LA Times piece, is that polling has become like a game that they're playing, right? And one of the things, I used to love watching cooking shows on television, right? I grew up watching Julia Childs, and some of your younger viewers have no idea who Julia Childs is, but
I know.
and learning recipes and learning how to cook. But you watch cooking shows today, and they're all a competition. They're like a race. And you're not learning anything about how to cook. And is that sort of reality television drama narrative thing is also creeping its way into Poland.
No, I love the narratives. I mean, the metaphors you've used. I love the example of the cooking shows. I even more so love the example of the going to get your blood drawn. The doctor ain't got to suck all the blood out of you to get a sample to tell you what's wrong with you. And polling essentially works the same way. Love both of those analogies. When we come forward, though, there are two things that are jumping out at me that I want to put to Cornell Belcher, America's preeminent African American pollster. And I'm not naive in asking this, but he makes a powerful point about the fact that the media only wants to cover the horse race, certainly at the presidential level, but never really unpack the policy impacts of these decisions, of these politicians' decisions. Why is that? Again, not naive in asking that. And I hear Cornell's point that black people shouldn't care about these polls, but tell me why I shouldn't care when poll after poll after poll, there appears to be a pattern of concern. And it's nothing to tell me not to care. The Biden folk care. They're concerned. So why should I not care? But they should. Our guest is Cornell Belcher. More when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
Seeking the truth. Speaking the truth. This is the Tavis Smiley Show.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. New polling data shows President Biden trailing GOP presidential frontrunner Donald Trump on major policy, economic, and personal comparisons. That's according to a new poll from NBC News. Biden trails Trump by more than 20 points when asked which candidate would better handle the economy. The president's deficit versus Trump on handling immigration and the border is greater than 30 points, and Biden's approval rating has declined to the lowest level of his presidency at 37%. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries says House Republicans are following orders from former President Trump. Speaking on ABC's This Week, the African-American New York congressman said extreme MAGA Republicans are putting Trump's interest ahead of those of the American people. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network, and BINnews.com.
When you get your biggest tax refund from Jackson Hewitt, prepare to shout, "Jackson Hewitt, yeah!" from the rooftops. In the event you don't get your biggest refund, you'll get your money back, plus $100.
Is this the takeover? This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Clippers are 5-1 on their 7-game road trip. They beat Miami by 8 on Sunday. Kawhi Leonard led the Clippers with 24 points, 21 points and 11 assists for James Harden. The Clippers wrap up their trip tonight in Atlanta, 4:30 tip-off. The Lakers are back in action today. They're at Charlotte, last game of their 5-game road trip, 4 p.m. tip. Another strong performance by USC freshman Juju Watkins. The Compton native dropped 29 points Sunday to help USC's women's basketball team win by 10 at Cal. Watkins has scored a combined 80 points in USC's last 2 games. Watkins is now the nation's number 2 scorer with 27.2 points per game. Iowa's Caitlin Clark leads the nation at 32.4. The Kansas City Chiefs and San Francisco 49ers arrived in Las Vegas Sunday. Super Bowl 58 is next Sunday at 3 p.m. on CBS. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Zoe Williams, a.k.a. the Voice of Reason, encouraging you to join me weekdays from 7 to 9 p.m. for the world's most intriguing relationship radio roundtable. Every night, I facilitate and encourage our loyal listeners to participate in the most engaging relationship discussions you'll hear anywhere. So make it a point to rendezvous with me, Zoe Williams, the Voice of Reason, Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Trust me, your relationships will never be the same. The VOR is on fire tonight.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black. Linking social justice and climate justice all year long. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
We all agree that America has a very serious problem.
Okay, KBLA delegation, we need your help as we launch our 2024 Climate Justice Campaign. We would deeply appreciate you going to our KBLA 1580 website and filling out a short climate justice survey, which will help us better serve our beloved community as we build out this campaign. It'll take you just a few short minutes to complete the online survey, and the information you provide us will be invaluable as we do our part to hold folk accountable and amplify the voices of our people in this climate conversation. When you take the survey, you'll be automatically entered to win seats at our annual Black History Month luncheon, Thursday, February 29th. So, hit our website at KBLA 1580. Help us out by taking the short climate justice campaign survey, and you could be our guest at our annual Black History Month luncheon, Thursday, February 29th. Thank you in advance for your consideration and cooperation. At KBLA Talk 1580, we care about the community, we care about the climate.
If you love to travel, Capital One has a rewards credit card that's perfect for you. With Venture X, earn unlimited double miles on everything you buy and turn everyday purchases into extraordinary trips. Plus, receive premium travel benefits like access to over 1,300 airport lounges where you just check in and chill out. Open up a world of possibilities with Capital One. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. Lounge access is subject to change. See CapitalOne.com for details.
Sounds different, huh? This is Tavis Smiley.
I'm laughing, Cornell Belcher, as you probably are, because we led into that break, at least on my station here in L.A., with our news, and of course, all the stations across the country that carry us are carrying news as well. So I'm sure they heard the same news reports in Philadelphia and Chicago, New Orleans, and everywhere else that we are heard. They heard the same news I just heard. So here we are talking to you about polling. And what's the lead news story? New NBC News poll finds Donald Trump leading Joe Biden on a number of issues. So that, and you probably heard the same news story that I just heard on our national news feed. So I'm cracking up. Is that not the point you were just making?
Yes, that is exactly the point I was just making. And so this is what's so interesting to have. It is, and you know this because you've been in the media, Lord, for a long time. Not saying that you're old, but you're seasoned. That you've been in the media for a while. Is that the media globs onto a story and it becomes like a mob mentality where it sort of drives the story. And we saw that with the red wave sort of story about the midterm election, which was just not true. And look, so Quinnipiac put out a poll, and Quinnipiac University, which Quinnipiac poll is they do solid polling.
Sure.
So Quinnipiac put out a poll, I think a couple of days ago, that with a headline that Biden holds a 6-point lead over Trump. That headline went nowhere, right? And so that's my point, right? So Quinnipiac, a poll that is a solid poll, reputable polling. National polling comes out, says that Biden is actually leading Trump by 6 points in the head-to-head race, and that headline goes nowhere. But so it becomes a reinforcing narrative around it. And to your point, why should we not care about polls? So a couple of reasons. One is, and it goes back to the point I was making, Tavis, about is it something that I can act on, or is it something that's important to me? Look, I know that from all the news reporting that Tay-Tay is probably going to make it from Japan to Vegas in time for the Super Bowl, right? I think that's interesting, but I don't need to know it. I don't need to know what the horse race number is for the presidential every other day because, again, one, it's not information that I can act on. It's not information that's impacting my life or giving me direction. And what's important is, again, that number is going to change, and we're literally going to spend $100 million to change that number. And let me break that down a little bit more. From a campaign standpoint, is what the importance is. I always tell my clients the least important number in a poll is the horse race number. And why that's the least important number in a poll is because that number is going to change. And because we're going to change that number. And we've gotten pretty damn good at changing that number, especially if you have several million dollars, you're going to change that number. If you go back to let's go back to the last incumbent, not Donald Trump. Let's go back to the last Democratic incumbent. In 2011, going into 2012, Barack Obama was trailing Mitt Romney in all the national polling. And as you probably recall, New York Times even put up a headline that's asking whether Barack Obama was toast. He was trailing Mitt Romney. He was even trailing, at some point, Michelle Bachmann. Now most of your viewers won't remember who Michelle Bachmann is, and there's a reason for that, right? But what we use in that campaign is it's an understanding of, okay, what's the problem that the campaign has to solve for? And just like in 2011 going to 2012, you know what? A lot of young people who were the base of Obama's coalition, they were not happy about the level of change that they were seeing, right? Not enough change had happened. They felt disappointed that things hadn't changed. Young people always want immediate gratification. No change overnight. So just like and again, I was a part of Obama's campaign in 2008 and 12. One of the so what's the problem we have to solve for? We've got to tell these young people a story of what it is that the president's been working at, and who are the bad guys, who are the good guys in that story, and how many of the changes that, in fact, he wanted to implement got blocked by Republicans.
Sure.
But this is what he did. This is what he tried to do, and this is what he accomplished for you, and this is how it impacts. And moving forward, if you give me your vote, this is what we're going to try to implement. The only thing, what's most important for a campaign is, Tavis, is there a story to tell? Do you have a good story? Right? I don't care what the horse race is, right? Because most of my clients are never ahead at the beginning anyway. But is there a good story to tell? And if there's a good story to tell, we can move that horse race number. And what I would argue, and again, I'm not being partisan, I'm just being completely straightforward to you, Tavis, if you look at what President Biden's been able to overcome and been able to do over the last couple of years, Tavis, I think he's got a better story to tell American people than Barack Obama did.
No, I think you're right. I think I wouldn't argue that at all. I believe you are right about that. That Biden has a better story to tell than Obama did when he certainly ran for re-election. That said, we say all the time, as you know, that Black Lives Matter. Indeed, they do. But do patterns matter? And that's my question. Every one of these polls, I hear your point that we shouldn't care about these polls. But when it comes to Biden and Trump, we keep seeing them every other day. We just mentioned an NBC News poll that just came out, and so there's a pattern here. So maybe on the one hand we shouldn't care because the numbers gonna move. And I got a question about money moving numbers in a moment. I'm going there, right? But the question for now is, do these patterns matter?
They matter to a campaign in that. But what's the pattern?
The pattern. Maybe you asked that question rhetorically, but the pattern that most fellow citizens are hearing right now, the pattern is that all these polls show that Joe Biden is in trouble in this race against Donald Trump, no matter how great a story he has to tell. That is the pattern I think most fellow citizens are getting these days.
Well, but yes, but why? But here's the thing. So was Ronald Reagan.
Yep. Yeah.
So was George Bush.
Right.
Right. So was Bill Clinton. So that's the actual pattern, right? Is people, especially for presidency, people always want to shop around.
Yeah.
But there's also a reason that the overwhelming majority of incumbents, particularly presidential incumbents, win re-election.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Even regardless of what where they start off, right?
Right.
They can start off, not trailing a challenger, but do they have a story to tell? And over the next couple of months, as you saw with Ronald Reagan, as you saw with George Bush, as you saw with Bill Clinton, as you saw with Barack Obama, they had a pretty darn good story to tell voters and move them back in line. The other thing is, and again, I'm getting math here, is one reason I don't care where the initial horse race number is. That comes with a caveat. But I particularly don't care what the initial horse race number is, particularly and sort of the margin of the lead is irrelevant as long as no candidate is at the magical 50+1.
And that's your caveat.
Right.
Yeah.
If you're not at 50+1, none of that matters because again, we can move voters and we know how to move voters. So if you see a poll that says, Trump leading Biden by 5 points, I don't care because Trump is never at 51%. And by the way, he's never been at 51% because in actual election, understand who Trump is. He's a 47% proposition.
Yeah, I like that.
Right.
That's why Cornell Belcher wrote this piece for the LA Times, that we should not be panicked by all these polls, including the one that just came out today from NBC News that shows Biden trailing Trump. You should not be panicked because the real pattern is that most of these presidents get reelected anyway. And Joe Biden, more to Cornell Belcher's point, that Joe Biden has the best story to tell. And once he starts spending money to tell that story, he's going to move that horse race number. That's what Cornell Belcher, Black America's preeminent pollster, just told us. Now, what I want to indict him on when we come forward is what it means that you can have a number and that money can move that number. I'm not naive, but what does it mean that money can literally move that number? We ain't talking about policy impact. We ain't talking about a story to tell, per se, but money can move that number. Cornell Belcher on Tavis Smiley.
Hope, agency, dignity. This is Tavis Smiley.
Can you dig it? Come on!
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we do Black history every single day. In fact, as the only Black talk radio station west of the Mississippi, we are Black history. Our annual Black History Month luncheon is fast approaching, and we want to be sure to give you ample time to get your company, organization, church, or group to join us at this year's celebration on the last day of the month, Thursday, February 29th at noon. Last year, we honored iconic local Black media personalities, including Pat Harvey, Jim Hill, Mark Brown, Beverly White, Sandy Banks, and Pat Prescott, and raised $20,000 in scholarships. This year, we're honoring Black Hollywood creatives who have used their artistic genius as climate justice champions. At this year's luncheon, we will be showcasing and sharing their inspiring work on our big screen. Plus, a scrumptious meal, live music, great company, and lots of fun with your favorite KBLA Talk 1580 hosts. So contact us today at info@smileyAudiomedia.com or call 323-290-4690. That's info@smileyAudiomedia.com or call 323-290-4690. We hope to see you Thursday, February 29th as we close out Black History Month. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your Black.
Watch out! You got me!
The galaxy is safe once again.
In the pretend universe, kids play with pretend guns. In the real world, it's up to us to make sure they don't get their hands on a real gun. If you have a gun in the house, keep it locked, unloaded, and stored separately from ammunition. Safe gun storage saves lives. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. That's endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by End Family Fire, Brady, and the Ad Council.
Ready to re-examine your assumptions and expand your inventory of ideas? More of Tavis Smiley coming your way right now.
All right, Cornell Belcher, you have convinced me, I'm not sure how the audience feels, but you convinced me that I shouldn't panic about all these polls showing that Biden is trailing Donald Trump. Okay, so I won't panic. You further convinced me that I should not be concerned about the pattern, the narrative the media is giving us, because the real pattern ain't that Biden is losing to Trump in these polls. The pattern that matters most is that presidents get reelected. And the third point you've convinced me of, I mean, actually, we agreed on this. We already agreed on this, and that is that Biden clearly has a better story to tell than Trump, and in many respects, a better story to tell than Obama had when he ran for reelection. So you and I are simpatico on all three of those points. The point I want to press you on, again, not out of any naivete, is what it means that like you sit back and you're pretty chilled because whatever the horse race number is, you know you can move it with money.
Well, Tavis, I will say I wouldn't say you shouldn't be completely unconcerned. I think there's some level of concern that someone who has said that he's going to bring down basically martial law and on America from day one if he's reelected and round up his enemies. I think there should be a lot of concern for that. And that such a person is actually going to garner probably, again, 46 to 47%. And this is the other important part is that the majority, and this is the reality I got. It's uncomfortable, but my job isn't to make people comfortable. But the reality is that you have to hit people with is that a man who's done all these things, and from sexual assault cases, to riots, he's going to garner Tavis again somewhere between 46 and 47%, like he always has, and the majority of white voters are going to in fact not excuse his racism and vote for him. So that's where we are as a country. And so it is incumbent upon the rest of us, the majority of us, to coalesce around one candidate who can stop that, right? Because one of the things that speaking of story, so this is part of the story that I think we're trying to unpack with, especially voters of color, and it's a story about democracy. Tavis, is if you think you got it hard now, if you think that the police don't respect your rights and the government doesn't respect your rights now, you wait until there's no democracy. You wait till they actually don't have to listen to your voice at all. If you think you're catching hell in America right now, you don't know what hell is until there's no democracy and they don't and you have no rights. Right? So again, that's a story.
No, that's a story. That's a sobering thought, a quite sobering thought. Our remaining moments with our preeminent poster, Cornell Belcher, when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
What's your quarrel with the world? You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 believes in community empowerment. LA's 99 neighborhood councils form the grassroots level of the Los Angeles city government. The system was created to connect LA's diverse communities to City Hall. While neighborhood council board members are volunteers, they are also public officials elected to office by the members of their community. Neighborhood councils advocate on issues like homelessness, housing, land use, emergency preparedness, public safety, parks, transportation, and sustainability. They also provide local expertise on the delivery of city services to their various communities. Neighborhood councils are open to participation by anyone who is a part of the fabric of daily life in said community. This includes those who live, work, or own property or a business. If you are interested in stepping up to join your local neighborhood council, visit www.empowerla.org. That's empowerla.org. It's time to think globally, but act locally. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580 is the exclusive media sponsor of this light of ours, activist photographers of the Civil Rights Movement. A dynamic new exhibition on view now at the Skirball Cultural Center in Los Angeles. This light of ours showcases more than 150 photos taken by movement insiders from diverse backgrounds that reveal the vital work undertaken by a broad coalition of organizers and everyday people whose collective action changed America. This light of ours is one of 3 temporary exhibitions currently on view at the Skirball, which together explore issues related to civil rights, immigration, and pluralism. Tickets and more information for all 3 exhibitions are available at skirball.org. That's skirball.org. SKIRBALL.org.
Who do you trust to get at the truth? Tavis Smiley. That's who. The conversation continues right now.
I got a tight 3.5 minutes, Cornell Belcher. Let me see if I can get 2 questions out right quick. Number one, we've been talking about the presidential race, and I mentioned earlier, of course, our new poll out at my home station in L.A., KBLA 1580. Go to the website, read about our political poll for black voters in L.A. about crime and progressive DAs, et cetera, et cetera. A great poll with some interesting data. But tell me right quick how you're looking at the House and the Senate, and I got another question I want to ask before I lose you.
I think the House, if you look at the House map right now, you look at the great job I think the DCCC, which Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, is doing, both recruiting and, again, this question about money and raising money. And you look at the districts where a Republican sits in that Biden won last time around, and it's such a small hole that Republicans have on the House right now, and redistricting where courts are throwing out some of these gerrymandered maps, and where Alabama, where you're going to get another black seat, maybe in Louisiana another black seat. I like Democrats' chances of holding House.
Okay.
In the Senate, they have a tough map, right? You have Montana in there, and you have Ohio, states that have been red and tend to break red. But you also have candidates there in Tester, and there who represent the values of those areas and have been able to break through. So I think the Senate's tough, but it's a toss up in a good year.
Yeah.
I think we can hold the Senate, but I feel I'm bullish about our ability to take the House.
Yep. So you got Tester in Montana and Sherrod Brown in Ohio, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And again, Brown knows how to win there in Ohio.
Yeah, he does. My last question right quick here is the Supreme Court is going to hear arguments this week about Donald Trump and being on these ballots in all 50 states. You know, various states have had different decisions on whether he's going to be on or off, but they're going to hear arguments this week. What do you expect? What do you expect the Supreme Court is ultimately going to say about his being on the ballot?
I expect that the Supreme Court's not going to throw Donald Trump off the ballot, hard stop. And then I know we're up against a hard time, but I want to answer your question about money, and money is about communications, right? And it's expensive to communicate across these many states, and so it shouldn't cost $100 million to run for president. But unless we get campaign finance reform passed, we're going to have no other country spends hundreds of millions of dollars on campaigns like we do, and it does push out the voice of average Americans.
Yep. He wrote a provocative piece, a powerful piece, a persuasive piece for the LA Times called Panicking Over Polls Showing Donald Trump Ahead of President Biden. Please stop. Love that headline. Panicking over polls showing Donald Trump ahead of President Biden. Please stop. That's the headline in light of the NBC News poll out today that does exactly what Cornell Belcher and I have been talking about. Another poll indicating that Biden's in trouble in the race. Cornell Belcher says, stop it. Just stop it. No need to panic at this point. And that Joe Biden has a better story to tell. And once he starts telling that story and they start spending that money, things may very well turn. Let's hope so. That's my commentary, not Cornell Belcher's. Cornell Belcher, good to have you on. We'll do it again between now and November. Thank you for your time, sir. All the best to you.
Thank you, brother.
Good to have you on. When we come forward, an amazing and powerful, inspiring Black History Month conversation with the 109-year-old oldest living survivor of the Tulsa Massacre, Viola Ford Fletcher, only on Tavis Smiley.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Mike Moore.